everyone. Thanks for joining us today on the Thursday, April 16th edition of the Quarantine Chats. On Thursdays, as some of you know, we focus on HR issues, and we're very pleased to have some guests with us today. I'll introduce them in just a minute. Today, we are going to run through the latest updates in the COVID response news as affects business. We're going to have some top tips on engagement for teams, and we're going to talk about what you can and can't do as an employer. Many people making moves, working differently, potentially laying off, or maybe even thinking of hiring, and it's important to know what's allowed and what isn't. We're going to have lots of time for Q&A in this session. And so a special shout out to the folks who join us every session on Facebook Live. Really very much appreciate that you're tuning in. If you'd like to put in a question, please find the link on our homepage. Your Quarantine Chats is Entreflow.com, and you can come on into the Zoom session and post a link in there. Or of course, email us and we'll see if we can get your question answered. If you're on the Zoom link, then there is a question and answer function. If you hold your mouse over the Zoom controls, you should be able to type in a message into the chat box and the panelists will hear it. While the panelists are talking, we're going to have the mics closed, but we'll often pause to answer questions as they come through, so feel free to type them in. And at certain points, we may open up the microphone so that anybody on the line can throw in their question. When we do that, we just ask that you raise your hand and then go off mute so that we're not getting dogs and cats and kids in the background. Much as we love them, can be a bit distracting. All right, with that, we'll start with some introductions. I'm the guy in the top left there, Iain Rogers, founder of Entreflow. With me today, I have Bronwen, our HR practice manager at Entreflow, and our special guests, Dustin from PaymentEvolution and Ryan from Matthews, Dinsdale and Clark. And I'll hand it over to you guys individually to introduce themselves. Bronwen, do you want to go first?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I'm the HR practice manager at Entreflow, like Iain said. I've been with Entreflow for about 3+ years now, helping out with HR management, recruitment, and employee-related type projects and monthly work with small and medium-sized businesses. Also working with HRIS systems. And yeah, that's me in a nutshell. Pass it on to Dustin. You can tell us a little bit about him.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dustin Meneses. I'm the Senior Manager of Sales and Business Development over at PaymentEvolution. We were just so you know, the first cloud payroll solution in Canada. We've been around for about 11 years, and we're doing our best. And thank you for having us here to provide some insight on the payroll landscape right now with the beautiful things that are going on right now with COVID-19.
Sounds good. Thanks, Dustin. Ryan, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Sure. My name is Ryan Anderson. I'm a labor and employment lawyer with a firm called Matthews, Dinsdale and Clark. We're a boutique law firm that represents employers in respect of all things workplace. So if a matter arises in the workplace and it connects with the law, that's what we do. So it's a narrow field, but it's a pretty broad umbrella. So it's everything to do with the employment relationship, contracts, human rights, privacy, safety, COVID, apparently, and you name it. We have offices in Vancouver, Calgary, Ontario, and one in Halifax as well. So we're the first boutique labor and employment firm to have a national footprint, and it's been really fascinating, frankly, over this period of the last 4 to 6 weeks. Coordinating with employers who are operating in multiple jurisdictions, because we're watching these jurisdictions sort of leapfrog one another as they try to deal with this crisis. So it's been a very, very interesting and fast-paced and fluid time, and obviously very topical. So away with it. Let's go.
Okay, let's do it. Just a bit about Entreflow, because I didn't introduce that properly.
Of course.
We're a boutique consulting firm ourselves, acting for and with management of small and growing companies. We do, of course, HR consulting and recruitment. We're a CPA firm and we offer CFO services, and we do some marketing strategy and on the revenue side of things as well. Brief list of services that we do here, but it's not really about us. We're offering these chats so that we can all keep up on the news and talk about ideas that will help each other get through this challenging time. So here's a rundown of the latest news. I'll try and move through it as quick as I can. The CRA wage subsidies for business, known as the 75%, that bill was passed over the weekend. We have no update on exactly when those funds will start flowing. The latest was that it would be 2 to 4 weeks from that time when it was passed. So that might be early May by the time those things start coming through. If you weren't aware, they changed the eligibility requirements for those. Many of us lobbied for this to happen, and they did. So you can now use January, February of 2020 as part of the criteria for calculating your revenue reduction to see if you qualify for that. There is an update on the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. So that just came through, I think it was yesterday or the day before. Was it yesterday?
I believe it was yesterday, yeah.
Great. So this was a $500 a week or $2K per month benefit to people who had lost income as a result of COVID. And it was for people who are not working at all, not making any money. However, they've allowed people who are making up to $1,000 a month to still qualify for this benefit. So have a look. Again, it's still on my CRA. If you log in there, you should be able to apply and see all the eligibility criteria right in there. The next item is the CEB application. So this is the Canada Emergency Business Account. It's the 40K loan that's being made available to small businesses in Canada. We're so happy to see this come through this morning. Trudeau announced that he's reduced the payroll requirement to be part of that. So the requirement to qualify for this loan was that you had more than 50K of payroll in 2019 and less than $1 million of payroll in 2019. And if you did, then you could apply for this loan and get an interest-free and partly forgivable and friendly terms loan. But many of our clients who were startups, high-growing companies, maybe the founder wasn't paying themselves in salary, they were paying themselves in dividends, very common, or maybe they had contractors on for a good part of the year before bringing them on as employees. Still really wonderful businesses and up to big things in the world, but not qualifying for that. So the petition went round. We talked to people at the CBC. We talked to whomever we could, and it seems voices were heard. And so we're excited that that's Trudeau announced that. So still waiting on details to emerge on there. These will flow through the commercial banks. So get on there, talk to your commercial banker at this point. They'll probably come back to you and saying, yeah, we heard the announcement too. We're waiting on the official program updates internally in our bank and should have this out there. That's the response I'm expecting from the commercial banks. But hopefully, since the path is worn, they'll be able to make those changes more quickly. Okay.
Actually, Iain, if you don't mind, I just received word internally here at PaymentEvolution, literally about, as you were kind of explaining that. So some of the details that you need to know, just because we've been, very much lobbying as well and making sure that we can provide some help to all the Canadian businesses that we're we're helping here. It seems like the previously 50K, over 50K, under $1 million is now 20K to on the high end to $1.5 million, sorry. And of course the applications are still being held via your main business bank specifically. So it's crazy that we've been able to do that. So kudos to all that have been doing that work, and kudos to you guys. It will now include a larger segment of businesses. But we'll see. I know that some people are still, where it's still kind of trying to help out as much as possible. And some people will still qualify and some people won't now still.
Sounds good. And when people are just the mechanics of the application. So for those people who now think they are able to qualify, I'm sure they'll be looking at their payroll records in 2019. That's and I can't remember, Dustin, what documentation they need to produce to show what payroll they had. Do you know?
The simple answer is no. I mean, right now, everything that we'll be able to provide will be in the year-to-date payroll reports that we have. That's all we can really provide based on what what we have in the application specifically for PaymentEvolution.
Okay.
I'm sure it's going to be closely tied to the accounting software. So a lot of that information is going to be partially in the payroll service as well as the accounting software. So again, we're really leveraging accounting professionals and firms like yourself to be able to provide the most insight for the clients.
Okay. I think I remember that it might be the T4 summary that might have that information. Let me just see if I can get a quick answer on that as we go through here. These next two bullet points weren't mine, so Bronwen, do you want to jump in and explain what the Wellness Together program is?
Yeah, absolutely. So something that was announced I think mid to early this week was that the Government of Canada has put together a Wellness Together program, which is a mental health web portal. I think there was some requests to the government for providing support to those who are alone at this time and needing a little bit of support on the mental health side. So they have opened up this web portal. It's available on the Government of Canada website. I'll hyperlink it into here after our call our webinar today. But there's resources, tools, and all sorts of other things out there for anybody who might be struggling at this time, especially with being inside the house and having uncertainty around kind of what's happening with COVID. So that's something that they've rolled out this week. The other item is that Trudeau this morning, after his announcement about the reduction in the payroll requirement for the amount, he's also said that they are going to be having a program to come to help businesses with their rent. I know that that's been a question that we've had a couple times over the past couple weeks here. So they are putting something together, and hopefully in the coming weeks we'll hear more about that. The idea is that the rent, they'll be providing assistance on rent coverage for businesses for, I believe I saw 3 months. So we'll have more information on that one to come. But for those of you that have been looking for that information, it sounds like they are working on something here.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Can I make a couple of comments just about the CRA subsidy program? I've had the occasion to speak with a couple of very experienced tax lawyers and tax accountants, and there's three sort of takeaways that really struck me. The first is that they described the legislation enacting this as remarkably complex. And when a tax lawyer says something is remarkably complex, they usually mean it. And so they said, there's much uncertainty and how these programs are implemented and what the fallout looks like on the back end is going to be much to be seen. Two little nuggets. One was the reduction to 15% as the threshold. Don't quote me on this as legal advice, because I've not analyzed it myself, but they were very surprised to find and reported that if you qualify for that threshold at 15%, you automatically qualify for the next month. Even though it jumps to 30%, qualifying in the first month will essentially mean that you've automatically qualified for the second month, even if subsequently records show that you didn't meet the 30% threshold. So that will be an interesting little nugget for some employers who don't know if they're going to be able to qualify for the second period. the final piece is the penalties. The penalties that are built in for employers who take actions that are specifically designed to make them eligible for the 75% when they would not otherwise have been. The penalties are very significant, significant multiples of the money that you receive, as well as the potential for jail time. The takeaway was be very, very careful about any activity that you take as an employer that could be viewed as, for lack of a better term, cooking your books so as to make it so that you qualify for this. So it was just a word of caution.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Ryan. That's good to know.
Yeah, let's not cook the books.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll pause here and just see if there are any questions on the line about these programs.
Yeah, we've got two questions here. One is, does the CEBA apply to sole props? That's the business account. That's a great question. Off the top of my head.
I don't know the answer to that. Just seeing if I can get a quick answer on the side to see if it does qualify. Let's see. Does the cooking your books apply to the 20K?
Err on the side of caution and assume that it will.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say as well. Chances are by this point, the your payroll for 2019 has been filed, so T4s will have been submitted to the CRA. So I would caution against restating those at this point. I think that would be a sort of a red flag. Probably if there are penalties, probably the penalties are lesser because this is a loan. But I'd still caution against doing that kind of thing, unless there is a legitimate error in how the payroll was run. But that shouldn't be the case because you were using good payroll software before, right, Dustin? Okay.
Last. Yes. Yes, you're right. Last week, one of our guests did have, it was a sole prop and applied for the CERB without an issue. So yes, I believe that the sole props, I was pretty sure, but I didn't want to speak to that until confirming that, but I'm pretty sure that the small sole props are eligible for that.
Yeah, so that's the CERB, that's the...
that's the response benefit.
The 2K.
Yes.
Okay, and then we had will this 75% wage subsidy be valid for new hires? So yes, it depends how you qualify a new hire. If someone has been recently hired before all this happened, then certainly there's nothing that I saw in the requirements that said that they had to have been working for a period of time. And also, I think the legislation is intended to help you rehire people who you might have had to let go. So I would assume that that this is going to apply here. Ryan, do you have any further comment on that one?
No, I don't have a specific answer to that question. There are certainly different criteria for employees in the category of a new hire, so you need to be cautious about that. And there are a couple of different considerations. I can't give you a precise answer now, but it's a good question that needs to get run down before you can be sure. Sure.
Okay, and I think some of our founders who are maybe on payroll or off payroll and have maybe had to make some decisions about how they compensate themselves are wondering, should they be now on payroll, and how does that interact with all the rest of the stuff that's going on? It's a complex question. Anybody want to field this one?
That's a tough one for me to even get into. I think complex question is putting it lightly, but I can tell you what's been on trend based on what we're seeing. What I'm noticing is that is that yes, a lot of founders or owners of the businesses have started to put themselves on payroll, just so that it makes it a little bit easier and more consistent with regards to the amount of money that they would be getting paid for themselves or things of that nature, to allow for just a little bit more clarity, when applying for some of these wage subsidies and such. But I don't have a right or wrong answer. I think there are multiple solutions here for the array of clients that are in Canada, the array of businesses that are in Canada, that allow them to kind of see what they can actually, where they fall into and what they can get benefits to. So it's a tough one. I don't know if anybody else could provide some more insight too.
I can't go much further other than, in those circumstances, you're going to be a non-arm's length employee. And the fact that you had no remuneration in January, February into March 15th, I think is going to create a hurdle. So again, I think you'd have to get very clear tax and accounting advice on that. And I'd have to study the legislation more carefully to give a precise answer. But I think those are the two hurdles you have to get over: is you're a non-arm's length employee and with no remuneration on the books prior to March 15th. That might render you ineligible. So I wouldn't say no, but I'd say it's a concern.
Yeah. General advice from our, that I've heard over and over again from the accountants on our team when dealing with this, is that for founders, where the business is in its early stages and cash is uncertain, it's typical to sort of draw a little bit here and there from the business when you can. And that doesn't look like a payroll situation. So pay yourself on dividends, run through shareholders loan, and then close it out to dividend at the end of the year. It's not a payroll unless it's just like everybody else is on payroll, the same consistent amount every couple of weeks or twice a month. And if you try and fiddle around with it, go on again, off again, or pay different amounts on your payroll every time, then that's the kind of thing that the CRA is going to look at and say, this looks really weird. And so you don't want that kind of attention. I'd say that if you were the founder and you were on payroll for consistently through at least part of 2019 through to the beginning of 2020, and had to make a decision to not pay yourself on payroll, then that's maybe a different circumstance, because it was kind of a payroll situation, and it was might fit into that dealing with yourself as you would an arm's length kind of person, and so maybe that's a different sort of circumstance. I wouldn't fiddle around with going on and off payroll just to be able to claim the benefit.
Yeah. Sorry, and I do have the answer for the sole prop and this Canadian Emergency Business Account. I just quickly looked it up here on my end just to give you guys a clear answer. Sole proprietorships are not eligible for the Canada Emergency Business Account, but there are other relief measures that they've put in place for individuals such as sole proprietors, such as the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit, which is the $2,000 a month. So check out the Government of Canada's website to get more information on that there. But no, you cannot get the Canada Emergency Business Account.
Okay.
All
right. That's the news. We've got more stuff to cover, so let's move on. And so I'll turn it over to Bronwen to talk about team engagement in this time. So can you take us through some of these ideas, please?
Yeah, so just some of our top tips for this week are around team engagement and how to kind of keep your team engaged, especially as lots of teams have been moving to virtual working, and maybe, our team's on week 5 now, and you might start to see a little bit of disengagement. So preemptive measures for keeping your team engaged is to kind of try and get your team involved as much as possible in big decisions. Those could be items such as, pivoting the business, if you're putting new structures and rules in place, and, just get your team involved in those decisions so that they feel as though they're a part of the organization changing at this time. We've talked a lot about town hall meetings, daily scrums, happy hours. We're firm believers in those ones, so keep those up or implement them if you haven't yet. Trying to get some team competition, some friendly competition potentially amongst your team members. So that could be something as simple as a workout challenge, or something along that lines. Maybe there's some online games that you could be playing with the team right now on their off time, just to keep that competition alive. Show appreciation to your team members as much as possible. It could be, even for the small things, just to kind of say thank you, appreciate what you've done. You're doing a great job. Keep it up. I think, the team really, it's good for them to hear that right now. One that I saw online that I thought was kind of cool was a randomized coffee break. So randomly pairing up two people within the team to have a coffee together throughout the day. So it could be, cross departments, if you've got different locations, kind of trying to get other people introduced to each other. I thought that was kind of a cool thing, because right now you might be just working with your team and your team only, and not really passing other departments in the hallways or at the water cooler type of idea. So this randomized coffee seemed like a cool thing to try out. The other thing that it will help is the updates weekly. So just having an open door policy and being over communicative potentially with your team to let them know about potentially if you need to think about doing layoffs on your team, or ensuring them that there won't be any layoffs on the team, just so that they can hear that, will help them remove that fear from their day. As well as changes to the team, it could maybe, or changes to the business, sorry. So if like the previous point, if you're going to be doing any pivoting or restructuring or anything like that, just make sure that you're keeping everybody kind of in the loop there. And then, also updating them on government support and announcements. So it could be related to businesses, it could be related to individuals, maybe that mental health support, portal will be helpful for your team. Maybe there's something in your benefits that they might be able to access at this time. So just ensure that you're kind of keeping everybody up to date weekly, just so that they know, that you're removing that fear piece from their thoughts. Okay, the next slide that we're going to talk about is how to spot disengagement in your team. So longer than usual response times, whether that's by email, phone, instant messaging. Overly negative response to feedback or issues, dragging on tasks. So if there's something that they're working on, it's seeming to take a little bit longer than it normally would for them, there might be a little bit of a flag, and general negativity or malaise. So just, if you're noticing that somebody who's generally upbeat and super, happy is kind of seeming a little bit off, you might just want to kind of check in with them and see how things are going there. Which is the next slide, which is kind of how to re-engage. So, you've noticed these disengagement in an employee. How can you re-engage them back? One-on-one conversations with them. So just checking in, ask how you can help them, ask what they want to be working on right now, ask them what would get them excited about work again. Maybe if you don't have the strongest relationship with that team member, ask somebody else on the team to reach out. Maybe there's somebody else that they, have built a relationship with, and they are able to kind of reach out and say, hey, what's going on? Are you okay? What's happening? Potentially temporarily changing their task and workloads or projects might help with some re-engagement. And it could be a project in a totally different department, just for them to be able to change it up a little bit. And those are, so that's kind of our tips for potentially disengaged employees, how to re-engage them, and how to continue engaging your employees virtually here. Anything that anybody wanted to add? Suggestions?
We had one.
Let me just jump in. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
This is not a scientific study. This is very anecdotal, and it just is my experience with our own firm. We've been doing this. We've been doing at least twice a week check-in for our Vancouver office. And I guess at the beginning, I'm used to it now, I was kind of surprised by how much it meant to staff and associates. And at first it was a little awkward. You had to get a bit used to it. And importantly, I think in at least some instances, we had no topic. was no reason to get together. We didn't even have an agenda. It was just a matter of getting online. And so it stuttered a little bit at the beginning, but then we're sort of sharing experiences and what we've been dealing with over the week. And sometimes even an agendaless meeting can be a good one. But anyways, my only point was my personal experience is that I was a bit surprised by how much it meant to folks, and now we're looking forward to it when they come up.
Super good. There was a comment in on the line saying disengagement might not be the fault of the team member, but isolation has been a long haul, and I completely agree. We have to start the thinking about this with compassion, because otherwise we're not going to get anywhere. And so having that kind of check-in, having the how's it going for you? What are the things that are bothering you? And it may just be, maybe just be general stress. But if you start there, then I think you're going to have a more productive relationship, conversation than, why didn't you get this done? Kind of conversation.
Yeah, they're not just working from home. They're working from home in a very stressful time. They're probably feeling, some of them, less efficient than they used to be, and they're worried about their job security. I mean, it's a stress sandwich, right? So it's not just a little vacation or a work from home test or pilot. It's an unprecedented time. So I absolutely agree. I don't underestimate the impact it's having on employees' mental health and well-being.
Yeah. And that's for teams that, our team has previously worked virtually for 3 days out of the week, and we'd go into the office twice a week. And even just the adjustment from going 3 days virtual to 2 days in the office to all virtual, any sort of shift in that working environment affects the team members. So even though you're like, oh yeah, my team works virtually all the time, just remember that there is other external factors that are kind of playing into this that are not normal to the regular working situations. So it's just something to keep in mind there.
I wanted to add something, if you don't mind. I'm noticing that a lot of the great points, Bronwen, on the signs of disengagement and kind of re-engaging with the employees. I'm noticing that this has been a really interesting time for a lot of people in our team. It's a pretty big team, and we're noticing that we're seeing either people rise to the occasion or people kind of still remain. It's funny. A lot of those signs of disengagement sometimes are just, where they take some time in responding back and things of that nature. It actually is very normal as well for many people to not have the habit of replying back to something instant. I'll give you an example. I personally, I put my phone away and I lock it in a drawer for most of my workday. And so if people are texting me or something like that, I'm not getting back to them. If it's a work thing, and I'm in a webinar as I am right now, they're going to be like, whoa, what's going on? Dustin is disengaged. But that's not actually the truth. But it's a really good insight as to finding out if those individuals are actually doing something or are rising to the occasion or are really hurting, as the other people here mentioned, possibility with the amount of stress and mental health really that we need to put some importance to. So it's really interesting. It's just I guess the point is that you're going to find out some key players in your team most likely in the next little bit, and you're probably going to find out some people that that are maybe not so key players. And that doesn't mean that they're not important, but but it gives you some insights as well if you pay close attention.
For sure, yeah. And those the disengagement spots. Thank you for bringing that up, Dustin. Not all of them are going to be the employees aren't going to show absolutely all of those signs. They might show one of them or two of them or none of them. So it's really, having those weekly check-ins, those one-on-one meetings, just to even something doesn't feel totally right about that, employee's presence in the meeting, you can kind of point to that and just say, hey, is everything okay? Well, how's your week been? Anything that, I can help with? How are you doing? Even just the how are you doing is enough to kind of open up the vault sometimes if people are having a tough time.
Yeah, that compassion that Iain mentioned, that empathy, there's strength in vulnerability. I know that many of us may not want to show that sometimes, but when we do, I know that in some of my experiences with some of my team members, I'll be like, hey, I'm feeling this way. And, how you doing? And, because of that compassion and that vulnerability being shared many times, and it has to be genuine. It can't be just like kind of automatic or, planned. Many times, it opens up a time for a conversation, and you guys can actually address many things aside from just the disengagement.
Mm-hmm. For
Mhm.
sure.
So these are all some really good things that that people managers can do. I wanted to comment on what we can do at scale a little bit. So just coming back from top leadership, certainly coming back to your point about over communicating. You don't want people wondering what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to communicate, no, we're not planning layoffs. Certainly that's going to deal with the job security thing that Ryan was talking about. If there are layoffs in the works, appropriate communication about that, it's very subtle, and that's probably something that Bronwen would want to help you with one-on-one. But also strategic planning stuff. I think that's really important too. Here's what we are thinking of doing. There may be unknown answers. We don't know how we're going to approach this pivot to selling online or whatever the pivot is. But at least saying, here's what we're doing, here are the unknowns, here's how you can help with this, rather than it being a closed door conversation amongst the top leadership, I think is going to be really useful and probably get a lot more from your team. And it's going to be easier for them to engage with that. So that's about communicating out. My question for you, Bronwen, is about how can top leadership get a sense of engagement from the team at scale? Yeah, individual managers can see if people are being responsive, but how can the CEO of a small or mid-sized company understand general engagement overall? Is that like a survey sort of thing, and what sort of tools might be employed here?
Yeah, there's definitely engagement surveys that you can be doing with your team. Quick 5-minute online survey, just kind of checking in. It would ask your employees a bunch of questions and just kind of get a general gauge of where things are at. They're all anonymous, so the employees don't have to feel as though they're going to get into trouble if they respond a certain way. But I think that's a great tool for this medium sized, the bigger businesses that you might have a couple levels that you're working with. I guess the other thing is just empowering your managers to be able to ensure that their team is engaged and kind of coming to the top CEO if they need and saying, hey, listen, I'm having a really hard time with this team, and what can we do? Something as simple as maybe a surprise and delight out to the teams might help with some engagement. So Amazon shipping some chocolates to their house or something that you might be able to talk to the leadership a little bit more about. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, Ian. If that helps.
Yeah, I think it does. And we have time for just one more quick comment because we've got to move on to the next thing. But just came in from the line. Very valid point about the top leadership of the company also likely having some issues with mental wellness and dealing with a lot of stress, and probably the least supported person on the team because they're expected to have all the answers and to support everybody else. Totally understand that sentiment. I think that that the more you can be open with people to have some of that strength from vulnerability is important. Mm-hmm. Participating with other business leaders in panels, forums like this, right, where you can chat and share your ideas and concerns is definitely a good move to make, and giving yourself a break, right? That's going to be
just
very
20 seconds. 20 seconds on this topic. It totally resonates with me. I've been on the phone for 5 or 6 weeks now with many of these people, and a lot of the legal advice I'm giving sounds and feels a little bit like counseling. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of the time I am saying, look, it's okay to not have the answers. Like there aren't concrete answers to a lot of these questions. So you're not alone. You're not missing something. There isn't a website you can click on. There just isn't an answer yet to this. And I think that can be very helpful as a message to top leaders. And the other is, just as you've suggested, connecting just anecdotally, a friend of mine a CEO is in a CEO group. And he expressed to me how going virtually to his regular CEO meeting and just sharing their experiences was hugely important to him because they're all feeling the same stress, and it's significant. It's a great question.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay. On to the next bit, what you can and can't do. So this is the idea that people are probably thinking about making changes, doing some layoffs, or just changing policies on how people are working. So let's run through what's allowed and what isn't. Bronwen, this I think was your slide that you put together with Ryan. Do you want to take the lead?
Yeah, absolutely. So we kind of broke it out into a couple sections here. And Ryan, I'd love your input on these. So the first one that we talked about, and I think has been talked about quite a bit, is the layoff situation. So it can be done. You do need to have agreement from the employees in BC, and that agreement, Ryan, maybe from what I know is that it's kind of just a letter explaining why the layoff situation is happening, what they can expect. Is there anything from a legalities standpoint that really should be included in that agreement? And what happens if, I guess, the employees say, no, I don't agree?
Right. So this is actually a very controversial issue, not just because it's a layoff. In British Columbia in particular, but across every jurisdiction in Canada, the employment standards authorities are responding with different degrees of specificity. In British Columbia, it's a little bit unique. And your votes are accurate. If you go to the BC Employment Standards Branch website, it will tell you that you cannot do a temporary layoff lawfully unless the employee agrees, or unless the notion of a temporary layoff is enshrined in an employment contract, or it's otherwise part of an industry standard. Mm-hmm. Whereby if you purport to lay off somebody temporarily, if you don't meet any one of those three criteria, it's automatically a termination. If you do meet those criteria, for example, by way of an employee agreement, then after 13 weeks, it automatically becomes a termination. Yeah. So says the Employment Standards Branch website, but from an employment lawyer's perspective and employment lawyers across Canada, this is still a to be determined question. Very briefly, there's a section in the Employment Standards Act in BC that says that liability for notice or pay in lieu of notice of termination, whether it's a temporary layoff or a straight up termination, doesn't occur if the termination happens due to an unforeseeable circumstance beyond the employer's control. And if a global pandemic is not an unforeseeable circumstance beyond the employer's control, I'm not sure what is. Now, there's a difference between being shut down by government order, for example, if you operated a casino, versus being shut down because business dried up and you're a restaurant. So there's a lot of unknowns to be dealt with here. But I'll tell you this, many employers across British Columbia have moved to temporary layoffs. Mm-hmm. Don't have the employees agreement. It's just a necessity. It might last more than 13 weeks, and they don't intend on treating it as a termination. And the fallout of this will be very interesting.
Yeah, for sure. And what we've been kind of trying to do as much as possible with any businesses that are going through this situation is to provide a letter of some sorts, just kind of saying this is what's going on, just so that the employees understand a little bit. And it's nice to kind of receive something to explain the situation versus just an announcement. Yeah.
Super important, not just for employee relations, but also legal. So maybe more specifically to your question, the letters that we help employers draft in the situation go exactly to your points. Many employees are agreeing, tacitly. They're receiving the letter, they're condoning, they're not protesting. We say in those letters, I see an important comment in the box here about continuation of benefits. Continuation of the employment relationship, and that's the real core message of these layoff letters, these temporary layoff letters, is that this is not a traditional layoff. This is not a termination of employment. Don't infer that this has anything to do with us wanting to end your employment relationship. In fact, it's quite the opposite. This letter is about continuing your employment relationship. We're doing this temporary layoff to preserve job security. So we will continue your benefits. We'll continue your seniority, your service date. All of the other bells and whistles of your employment will remain. It's just this temporary layoff to get through this crisis. But the communication is particularly important.
For sure. Iain, did you have something you wanted to add there?
No, I think that covered it really well. I guess the other point is if you don't have contracts and policies and such, then it's not too late. You need to get these things in place. We've talked to several companies who just don't have any contracts for their employees. I don't know how they've been operating, but it's something that needs to be in place. So you can reach out to us or to Ryan to get this sort of thing started. It doesn't even have to be that complicated or that large of an endeavor to do, but it's better late than never. Okay, well, tell us more about if you don't want to do a full temporary layoff, but maybe just have people reduce the amount that they're working, and how about we do that?
For sure. So there's kind of now that the announcement has been made that we can that employees are eligible for the CERB under the $1,000 a month. Previously, the only option was to do a work sharing program. There's, the government of Canada has an application that you can go through. Essentially what happens is you group your employees into units, and the hours get reduced the same amount across the unit, and the responsibilities are then split out amongst that unit. And then the employees at that point would then be eligible to receive an EI top-up to help with the wages there. So that's one of the options. The other one now is that if they're under $1,000 per month, they are eligible to receive the CERB. So if you are looking to reduce the employees' hours so that they are under that threshold, then they are able to get the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. Looking into doing this for the hours reduction, my recommendation would be, again, to get a letter of some sort put together just to kind of state what's happening. Again, just for communication across the team, and a clear understanding of kind of what's happening. Ryan, anything that you wanted to add to the hours reduction there, or anything that I've missed?
No, it's a complex area. I've got many examples of clients who have got pretty intricate spreadsheets where they're sort of comparing, okay, how might I do a work share program? How might my employees fare under CERB? This introduction of the $1,000 limit has been very helpful, and of course, it's rendered their spreadsheets ready for an update. Yeah. There's also employers who have or have put in sub-programs, so supplemental unemployment benefits as by way of top up. And so it's really a matter of sort of balancing to figure out what works best for your business, what will be the best benefit for your employee. Most in my experience, most folks are defaulting to CERB. And I think even more now that they're able to provide up to $1,000 a month. But it's an effort in sort of a comparative analysis, what's going to work best for your business and for your employees.
Mm-hmm. So this might be best if I can just try and put an example on it. If you're the kind of business that maybe a particular business unit is working less, but not significantly less, then maybe that's the way to think about it. I'm just throwing it out there. So just to make it real, maybe I'm a software company and I've got customer support people, let's say. So there's a team of them and they're not busy at all because the customers they serve are not in business, or significantly less busy, let's say. So maybe their workload is 80% or 75% of what it normally would be. So that's the kind of thing that we're talking about here, right? That whole team would go on this kind of program where they reduce hours and have less pay and less work for it? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And there would be some support from the government as well to kind of help with the other side of the wage. So you're getting a wage reduction from the organization. You'd be able to get a little bit of a top up just to try and get your wage back to kind of 100%. It doesn't totally get there though. That in mind. It's so that's why, like Ryan said, it's lots of spreadsheets and decisions as to what's going to be the best for your team, for your organization, for your customers. It's a very complex decision there. Yeah.
And it's important, of course, to note that there's other programs. Most importantly, there's the CEWS, the wage subsidy. So these same employers will need to add that third bullet, which is, would a work share program make the most sense when I might be eligible for a 75% wage subsidy up to the maximum and keep folks on at or near full salary. So there's just multiple different programs to sort of compare.
For sure.
Great. Let's get our spreadsheets out. Okay, let's do the next bullet point then.
For
terminations.
So the next one, from what we've been able to collect, terminations are not allowed at this time, and for any reasons relating to COVID. So businesses closing down, and having to versus going the layoff route. Employees are allowed to quit at this time, but as far as I know, terminations are not allowed for reasons related to COVID. Ryan, anything you want? Am I wrong?
No, it's a little more nuanced than that. That sentence is absolutely accurate. If you were to dismiss somebody because they were absent related to quarantine, absent related to infection, absent related to childcare issues that are brought about by COVID. So absolutely. And as you're likely aware, there's a new provision, relatively new now, of course, a couple weeks, in the Employment Standards Act of BC that is called COVID-19 related leave. And so there's a number of different categories of eligibility where an employee might be permitted to a protected unpaid leave related to COVID. If an employee is on a protected unpaid leave due to COVID, you absolutely cannot move to dismissal. On the other hand, if you have no business and you've temporarily laid off an employee and an employer determines that there's no legitimate hope of this employee being recalled, then it's not wise to call it a temporary layoff if it is indeed a permanent layoff, in which case you can move to dismissal. But the question will be, what is your liability for that dismissal? A layoff due to a lack of business, a lack of work, is still a dismissal without cause. That means it's not the employee's fault, so the employee is notionally entitled to notice or pay in lieu of notice. And any employee plaintiff lawyer will tell you that every employee that's laid off due to a lack of business in this pandemic is entitled to notice or pay in lieu of notice severance. There's going to be an argument, though, that some of these instances are frustration of contract, a force majeure, a situation where, particularly where the employer's business is shut down by government order, we're going to see some employers take the position that no severance is payable in these circumstances because the contract of employment has been frustrated, impossible to perform to circumstances beyond the employer's control, relieving both parties of their obligations, and maybe no severance arises there. Very controversial, and we're going to see litigation on this, and we're going to see answers in the months that follow.
So you're going to be busy. Yeah. Okay. The last bullet point there.
Yeah, just to wrap this up. Sorry, and I didn't mean to cut you off there. The last point that I wanted to just bring up is something to think about for after. We talked a little bit last week about the kind of return to quote unquote normal. So bringing your workers back on after layoffs and changing or eliminating the remote working situation. So, now that everybody's been kind of used to working remotely, you're going to have employees who are like, hey, listen, I really liked this. Do I have to come back into the office? And maybe you as an organization have put a lot of time, money, effort into creating a situation where your team can work virtually. So what's going to happen at that point? The bringing back workers on after layoffs, Ryan, is there anything like legality-wise that you think, companies need to start preparing for, letters, job change letters, contracts? Like, is there anything that you think that should be taken into consideration for bringing people back?
It's a great question, and I think you can view it on a spectrum. There'll be some circumstances where it's as simple as, frankly, a phone call would work. Come on back. We're happy. We're back in business, back to your desk, and it'll be just smooth. I mean, telling someone to come back to their previous terms and conditions of employment is not that complicated. But in many cases, it won't be that simple. In many cases, the work they're coming back to will be different, either different by way of task, different by way of hours and volume, maybe even pay or pay structure. This happens a lot. A good analogy is a strike. When an employer is shut down by a strike for weeks or months, what happens is the employer figures out how to do things differently. They have to. By necessity, all of their employees have left. And so they realize efficiencies. They realize different ways of doing work. And so what a lot of employers are going to find is that when this is over and it's time for their employees to return, employers are going to want them to return on slightly different terms or maybe fundamentally different terms. And that's going to have to be dealt with through contract, right? That's going to have to be dealt with through very clear and written documented communication with employees that secures their agreement to those new terms. So yes, now is the time for employers to be thinking about what does the new normal look like? And if we're going to want fundamental changes, let's plan our communication with employees.
Yeah, And I think also for those companies that maybe don't have any contracts in place right now, might be a good time to get to your employees when they come back from their layoffs, to be able to sign off on a contract. To maybe not necessarily start fresh, but continue on with the good work with good contracts in place.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's we've got just a few minutes left, so let's open it up to Q&A. Aislinn, if you wouldn't mind unmuting the microphone so people on the line can chat. But I'll just kick things off and playing on that last comment about documentation and such. Everything's changed for everybody, and even if they did have a contract, now there's changes in how they're working. There will be further changes when they come back. So can you talk about what sort of changes to policy handbooks might need to be made, or contracts like right now that employers need to think about? I'll go Bronwen first, and then maybe Ryan can jump on that after.
Sounds good. So for policies to start, simple, not necessarily simple ones, but definitely policies around the virtual working expectations. I think we've talked about this in previous sessions, but definitely ensuring that you have policies in place for expectations of working remotely. So whether that's working hours, response times on emails, and just clearly setting those expectations for virtual working, I would say would definitely a good start or a good place to start for those policy changes. In the contracts, like I said, that last point, changing or eliminating the remote working situation. If you decide that your team is going to be, continuing with the remote working, if you have a work location clause in your contract, that's going to need to be reviewed to ensure that if it says, you have to be at Vancouver head office at 8 a.m. every day, that's not going to be the situation anymore if they're going to be working from home some days out of the week or all days out of the week. So that's definitely another one to review there, Ryan.
Yeah, no, you're bang on, absolutely. So that's right. You'll have to think carefully, as I said just a moment ago, about what are the fundamental changes that you're going to want to crystallize in an employment contract. The one thing we're going to see for sure in the future is employment contracts that specifically contemplate the possibility of a temporary layoff. Contracts don't typically have that. Certainly from time to time in certain industries where that is foreseeable, we'll put those into an employment contract, but it's pretty rare to have a written employment agreement that contemplates the possibility of an unpaid layoff. It won't be rare anymore. One thing we're learning about in the news about this particular pandemic is that we're going to get through this, but there's likely going to be second waves and maybe third waves. And if there's been one pandemic, obviously there could be another. And so employers will be looking to the future and thinking, I don't want to be having this conversation with the BC Employment Standards branch about whether I can temporarily lay off or not. I'm going to put that into my contract. Employees will understand it, having just experienced it. So I think that's one fundamental change we as employment lawyers are going to see in all of the contracts that we draft. I'll say one other thing. It might be hard for employers to put their minds to this because so much is going on, but to the extent that they can, generating some data and some metrics on how well the work from home experience is working. Mm-hmm. Because when you have employees come back from this, just as you said earlier, some employees are going to say, I love this. This is great. I want to go right back to it. Employers will be in a better position if they're armed with some data to say, in fact, it didn't really work. We did it because we had to, but in your particular instance, here are the reasons why. Here are the measured reasons why it didn't work. And on the other hand, that data will also tell you where it did work really well. So those employers and managers who are reticent to it in the past and said, I don't want to do it, I need your face here, might realize that, wow, this actually works really well. So if they have the time and luxury of that time to put their minds to that, now's the time to do it.
One of those projects that you can do if you need a little bit of a break, maybe. Mm-hmm. Something that can kind of step aside to do there.
Yeah. Well, so I'll leave the last slide up, but we have to wrap here. But a lot of these issues are things that business owners are going to have to work through. So if you need help with your policy manuals and issuing change letters and making sure people sign off on things and just running the process, Bronwen's a great person to help out with that. As sort of an acting HR manager for maybe companies that don't have that. Certainly reach out to Ryan if you have any questions about contracts and employment law and things that you are and aren't allowed to do. And Dustin's info is up there as well. And there's lots of payroll questions that are going on right now. And he's a great resource for that. Don't call me, I won't answer. No, I'm kidding. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or if you want to coordinate a chat with any of these folks. And I'll just close by saying thank you to everyone who joined us today. Thank you very much to our expert panelists. We know you're busy, and we appreciate that you're taking time to help out the community here. These recordings will be posted online afterwards, so you can feel free to share them around. And if you're on Facebook Live, hope to see you again, and hopefully next time join us on the Zoom and participate in the chats. It's richer for everybody if we have more people participating and chatting. So love these things. Thank you very much. We're going to keep going on these, and hope to see you again next week on Tuesday. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.